This video is made possible by Hey there, welcome back to the new season of Tutorial Tuesday. This time the season is about a remix I did for the Beatport remix contest of Zomboy's Here to Stay featuring Lady Chan. So first of all, you can see the whole look of the tutorials has changed a little bit, since I felt like upgrading the videos. Also, if you're wondering why this season is not the one about Glitch Up, please be patient since I'm working on that season as we speak and it will start airing after this special about the remix season. So to start off this video, I will take us through the first part of the intro in this track. So if you haven't heard the full track yet, then click on the annotation link that will appear in the middle of the screen right now. The track has been made available for free download on my SoundCloud since yesterday. So follow me on SoundCloud by clicking the link in the description below this video. So let's get started. The track itself can be divided in multiple parts, just like I did in the song structure video in the first season of tutorials. The structure of this track in particular is quite interesting compared to most of my older tracks, which is why I'll show you how it's set up. The first 24 bars are the intro. So that means that the intro consists of 3 parts, all 8 bars long. After that comes a build-up with a duration of 8 bars, followed by a 24 bar long drop. After this drop, there is a breakdown section with a duration of 16 bars, while the last 8 bars of this breakdown are also the second build-up that leads into the second drop. The second drop is a bit different from the first one, but still has a duration of 24 bars. After the second drop, there is a 16 bar outro to finish the song structure. Note that all these values are divisible by 8, keeping some sort of a consistency throughout the entire track. For now, I'll start playing the intro part of the track, which I'll be talking about in this and upcoming videos. If you keep an eye on these little mixer volume meters, you can actually see which tracks are being used in the intro as soon as I press play or when they are introduced in the composition. So in this first video, I'll go in depth into the first 8 bars of this track, so I'll adjust my loop markers so that it fits these 8 bars. Now you can see there are only 2 tracks which are being used during this part of the track, but actually these are all group tracks containing all other tracks. So let's start by opening up the real instruments and the synths group track so we can see what's going on in there. So the first actual sound that you hear in the track is that piano loop that you can also hear in the original track, but I did change it up a little bit. Let's turn off all the effects for now and add them in one by one while I try to explain what I did with them. So this is the loop without any processing to it. You can see that there is a volume automation during the intro on this track, which is because the auto filter on this track has a pretty high resonant boost. So to keep that from clipping, I had to automate the volume so that it slightly increases during the intro. So then I decided to add a beat repeat to it. This creates a little extra note in the piano loop by triggering the loop function on the device, which is then replacing the original since the beat repeat is set to the INS mode. So as you can see, the interval knob is set 1/2, which means that it's triggered every 2 beats, which equals half a bar. So the current selection is 1 single beat, while this selection is 2 beats. So when we look at the beat repeat, we can see it's triggered right on the transition between the first and the second beat. This might sound all like some magic to you, but it's actually not that complicated. Here you can see that the beat repeat is set to the INS mode, but when I switch it to the gate mode, you can actually hear what is added to the original loop. It's not much, but just enough to make the loop a tiny bit different from the loop used in Zomboy's original mix. So let's switch back to the INS mode so we can hear that in context with the rest of the loop. It basically adds a tiny stuttery note to the piano sequence. So let's move on to the next part, which is the filtering on the piano loop. This really sculpts the sound and makes it different from the original track. The autofilter is automated on both the filter cutoff and the resonance, as you can see when I open up all the automated parameters. You can see that during the first part of the intro, the low-pass filter is slowly opening up, then dropping back down towards the start of the second part of the intro. On that second part, I also introduced the automation on the resonance for the first time, and this is continued throughout the track to spice things up a little bit. So another cool thing I did is right before the second part of the intro begins, I made an edit to the piano loop. I did this by selecting a part from the loop, copying it over towards the end of the intro section, and then I reversed the audio portion by opening up the clip and pressing this little reverse button. So then I added an equalizer to the signal chain to get rid of all the sub-frequencies and to control the mids and highs a little bit. As you can see, when I take off the high pass, there are quite a lot of sub-frequencies in this piano loop, but as soon as I turn it back on, it cuts away all those frequencies. This helps to keep your mixdowns clean and crisp, since we don't need all those frequencies anyway for this sound. So this EQ is set to a high pass times 4 setting, which basically is the exact same as 4 individual high pass filters set to the exact same setting. But in Live 9 you now have this new high pass times 4, which will result in a much steeper curve. So if you're still on Live 8, just take 4 identical high pass filters and put them all on the same frequency with the same Q, and you have the high pass times 4. So finally, I added an utility to this track, and I'll explain why, since normally you could just use the track volume for this, right? Well, this utility was added during the mixing stage since I thought this track was a little bit too quiet. But since I had already automated the track volume and I didn't want to spend too much time redoing the automation, I chose to use the utility instead. So if I would change the track volume on this track, you can see the automation lane is now gray, which means it's inactive. I would then need to click this little button at the top to re-enable it, so in cases like this you can place the utility on the track and control the volume with that. So let's move on to the chords, which are introduced during the second half of this first section of the intro. These chords are used throughout the entire track, both during the intro and the drop. So again, there are multiple automations going on these chords, one for the filter cutoff, and again one for the track volume. So during the first section of the intro, the frequency on the low pass filter is slowly opening up. Then that same automation is repeated in the next part of the intro. But the track volume is automated as well. This makes sure that the chords start to kick in during the second half of the first part of the intro, if that makes any sense. The filtering gives these chords a more smooth and soft character during the intro, while they sound more aggressive during the main drop of the track when the filter is fully opened. So, believe it or not, but these chords are just a preset coming from Nexus, namely the Lead Transauce White preset. The only thing I changed is I took out the delay, if I remember correctly, and I adjusted the reverb to my liking. That's all there is to it in the main patch. Everything else is basically done with the processing that was added afterwards. So next to the low pass filter, I've also EQ'd this sound to get rid of all the sub-frequencies, since these will otherwise stack up and your track will start to sound a lot more muddy and it will be difficult to make it sound right. As you can see, there are clearly lots and lots of sub in it, so that's why I always check to make sure I take out those frequencies. That way you'll also gain some extra headroom. That really helps you a lot when making loud music, since you can use that headroom and fill it up with other sounds. Speaking about loud music, I also saturated this sound after the EQ to give it some more power and grit, but also since it works like a brick wall limiter and cuts off everything above 0 dB. I use that a lot these days, and it really helps making things sound more warm and loud. So then for the group bus tracks, I have on the Real Instruments group an instance of Cytomic the Glue. It's my go-to compressor and I really love the sound. It also comes with some very useful presets, which can give you a nice starting point to work with. I most of the time start with one of these presets and tweak them until it sounds good for my track. So this is the group with and without the compression. In the end, it brings the level up slightly, just to make things louder a little bit. Then for the synth group bus, on there I have a bit more processing, but actually it's not that much either. The first one is an EQ8, where I take out all of the sub-frequencies again, and as you can see there still were some low frequencies in there. Then I added one of the saturator presets from the live device browser called A Bit Warmer. This one makes the chords sound a lot bigger and really brings out that reverb. Then lastly on there I have two sidechain compressors, just to make sure that the kick and snare don't interfere with the chords. I used two separate devices so I could set them up with different thresholds for the kick and snare, so I could have more control about the amount of compression. So that's it for this first in a row of special videos about this remix. Next week I'll continue on with the next part of the intro. For all your questions, click the bottom left to tweet them to @ARTFX Studios on Twitter and I'll answer them as soon as possible. Or click the bottom right and become a member of the ARTFX website to share your music, give to and receive feedback from other users and just have a great time. Subscribe for more tutorials and have a nice day. See ya.